What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Cocteau Twins, as well as a very vocal Luca, and we're returning to the 1985 EP Echoes in a Shallow Bay. And the next track is Melonella, which I looked, and this is a moth species, so again, whether butterfly or moth, the thematic focus of the band over the last couple EPs seems quite clear. Once again, I don't expect there necessarily to be any narrative or even discernible scene setting in terms of lyrics, but I will be as attentive as I can to any words I can catch. Ultimately, I expect another lush soundscape, whether that's in a more dreamy vein or perhaps more heavy and cyclical. Either way, I'll see what it is. This is Cocteau Twins. The track is Melonella, and it's from the 1985 EP Echoes in a Shallow Bay. mesmerizing tune. Though I will say, like, sonically, you would never think it's anyone other than Cocteau Twins if you have any experience with them, which at this point still a lot to go, but I have heard enough of their material to get a clear sense of their stylistic range or the types of songs they make musically. And if I heard a 5-second snippet of this, I'm pretty sure I would immediately identify it as Cocteau Twins, yet it was less dreamy and floaty than a lot of their tunes, and less heavy and dark and cyclically brooding like some of their stuff, especially Garland's, of course, but one or two others since then. So it felt like a bit more energetic, a bit more frenetic. Now, again, that's not to say that there haven't been tunes of theirs that I've heard so far that were, again, not so much dreamy or down in the cyclical depths. But yeah, this one had a slightly different sound. It felt more energetic. Elizabeth's vocals, like in that, I don't know exactly, it was like da or something, but she, like, her vocals in those repetitive parts almost had like a percussive feel, like they were functioning like rhythmically and percussively as much as melodically. Then at the end, when I think her vocals were layered and we were hearing like polyphonic Frasier vocals, there was a almost like this animalistic cry that she was repeating on, I think it was like every fourth note or every fourth beat. And that was really intriguing too. Now, the like regular part of the singing, I think it was mostly Latin, which, you know, some of it sounded like Linnaean classification, you know, speaking about different classifications of genera and families and species, and maybe specifically about moths or butterflies. But yes, I didn't hear everything clearly, but like Andromedae and some other words, like they did come across a bit more clearly. But yeah, this one had a slightly more busy sound to it than some of their very floaty tracks, and yet it was still sort of light and moving. There was even a point along the way where it sounded like, you know, it would be kind of like an art tune more than in a lot of movie soundtracks, but I could see it being in like a montage in a movie where you're seeing people do things, even interact with others, but there's no dialogue. It's sort of like a time-lapse montage. I felt like you could use this track in one of those, although again, maybe more in like an art house film than like a major studio motion picture. But yeah, another really interesting track, which again has that like saturated style. I was really keying in on that bass line in particular, as well as that like double snare drum rhythm, and there was also some guitar like above the bass line that had a similar, maybe not jangly, but sort of rapid fire type of sound to it. So again, another compelling tune sonically, even if parts of it are still processing and I don't quite know what to make of the lyrics/words used. In any case, let me know what you think. I think there's 2 more tracks. I think there's 4 in the folder. Just want to make sure that's correct. Yeah, there's 4. So we still have Pale Clouded White, which again sounds like it will probably be in reference to a butterfly or moth. And then Eggs and Their Shells, which, you know, sounds like it could be a broader animal kingdom reference, though one would maybe assume it's still in the same sub-reference territory of butterflies and moths, but I guess we'll find out when we get there. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you next time. Peace.